Hello everybody, Andrew Holecek here, and this particular interview is one I've been looking forward to for quite a long time. It's with a remarkable scholar, practitioner, researcher, Dr. Clare Johnson, who's really one of the leading voices in the world of lucid dreaming. And as you'll soon see from her most impressive biography, and I think even more so as we start to dive into just a tremendous array of topics, we're in for a treat. So let me just read a little bit about who this remarkable person is. Dr. Clare Johnson was the first person in the world to do doctoral research into lucid dreaming as a creative tool. A well-known author and speaker, she recently headed up the International Association for the Study of Dreams as president and CEO. When she was 3, Clare had her first lucid dream and subsequently became a lifelong frequent lucid dreamer who has researched lucid dreaming for over 24 years. For the past 14 years, she has taught workshops on how to access the deep creative and healing potential of the unconscious. And she now leads lucid dreaming retreats around mostly Europe. And I will have the opportunity for her to share what she's doing very specifically at the end of our program. But Clare is the author of a number of remarkable books. One is the acclaimed Lucid Dreaming Handbook, Llewellyn's complete book of lucid dreaming, a comprehensive guide to promote creativity, overcome sleep disturbances, and enhance health and wellness. In this in-depth book, as well as sharing many original practices for getting and staying lucid, she shares her insights into meditating in lucid dreams, encountering the lucid light and the sparkling black void, and how lucid dreaming can be a path into a luminous death. And so as a parenthetical insert here from my end, this is absolutely what I want to discuss at some length with Clare, because very few people go to this deep end of the pool. So that's where we're going to be riffing. Clare's work on lucid dreaming has been featured in numerous documentaries, magazines, radio shows, podcasts, and television. She regularly speaks at international venues on topics as diverse as lucid dreaming for the dying, sleep disorders, and how to overcome nightmares and release fear. Her book, Dream Therapy, Dream Your Way to Health and Happiness, explores the transformative effect that dream work can have on our lives. And her newest book is The Art of Lucid Dreaming, a super practical guide with a lucidity quiz and personalized lucidity programs tailored to each individual dreamer. And in addition, and I did not know this, Clare, you've written short stories and I guess a novel or two that incorporate lucid dreaming. So,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, you are living and breathing a topic that has been at the center of my life for many, many decades now. So welcome, dear friend, dear new friend. And before we get going, I always like to start, I suppose with you, we could say at the shallow end of the pool before we take the deeper dive. Maybe share with our listeners, if you will, what inspired you to devote your life to the study and practice of these nocturnal meditations, as I come to call them.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Andrew, for having me on the show. And I'm really enjoying your Dream Yoga book, by the way, which I'm reading right now. So for me, this really is, as you said, it's like a lifetime path. It just became my path from a very early age. My first memory of my entire life is of a dream where I was drowning in a swimming pool, and I panicked, I was drowning, and I suddenly understood that I had a choice. I could either stay in that dream and drown, or I could choose to wake up. And I chose to wake up by violently throwing myself over and over in the swimming pool until I actually fell out of my physical bed.
Oh, wow.
And my mum came running upstairs, and she just said, "Oh, well, you had a bad dream. It's not real. It's just a dream. Go back to sleep." And that was really strange, because for me, that dream was super real. The colors of the water, the light coming through the water, the sensation that I was going to die. It was all so, so strong. And to hear my mum, who of course knew everything because I was only 3, so she was like, a goddess, hearing her saying that world was not real, it really sort of impacted me very powerfully. And as I continued to have very vivid dreams as I grew older, I started to understand that my parents didn't know everything about this other world. They didn't, even though they knew everything about everything else. And I had to kind of well, struggle through on my own, as so many people do. But if their parents don't know much about dreams, I had to learn how to deal with nightmares. I had sleepwalking episodes. I also had lucid dreams, amazing lucid dreams, when I was about 7 or 8, where I would fly out of the house and I would meet these magical beings who hid in the hedge at the bottom of the garden, and they would teach me magic from very old books. So I would have dream experiences like that, and I imagine, I would tell my mum and dad the next day. They were just like, "Yeah, all right, darling, she's a bit eccentric," they think to themselves. And so I never kind of was able to discuss it with anyone. So it was quite isolating on one level, but on another level, it was brilliant because it meant that I had to explore for myself, and I had to, by trial and error, work out how this other world worked. And my dreams were very, very conscious a lot of the time. And I had to work out how to deal with my nightmares and so on. And when I went to university, I was having a lot of sleep paralysis. And, I hadn't read a single book on dreams at that age. I didn't know really what was happening, why I was kind of stuck in this strange space, being spun around in black space, or, what's going on. I had no idea. But I taught myself to not struggle in that state and to release my fear. And I realized the only thing I could really control was my breath. So I started to do really deep, relaxing breathing whenever I was in sleep paralysis. And that would take me into a beautiful lucid dream. So that's when I learned to really kind of have lucid dreams at will through the state of sleep paralysis. So basically, all of those experiences meant that I've also taken the path of kind of, I want to find out things for myself. I'm not going to follow a particular tradition. I love and respect all sorts of different traditions when it comes to, any type of yoga, dreaming, things like that. But I've always been determined to find out for myself, I think because of my early experience with my parents. And that has been very, very interesting, to take a little bit from here and there and read widely, but then to say, right, I'm going to go into my dreams and find out for myself, what is the nature of consciousness? What happens when we die? How deep can we go? And what is the base of everything in reality? And you can find out answers, some answers to these questions through a practice of deep lucid dreaming.
Oh my gosh, Claire, I can't tell you. I mean, it's like music to my ears. You're like recapitulating my own biography. And if you don't mind, a couple of things pinged into my awareness around this is one is, the work of Diogenes and what he refers to as the absurdity of conformity. And how it is that exactly like you say, and I sometimes reference, I'm sure you've read the book of Charles Laughlin, Communing with the Gods, where he makes this really compelling assertion that, outside of Western European cultures, there are some 4,000 cultures worldwide, and around 90% of those are what he refers to as, these polyphasic cultures that adhere to altered states of consciousness and the validity of exploring things like lucid dreaming and so-called altered states. And so what it does, that what you're saying is just so spot on, that we live in a highly wake-centric, and I think it's largely based on Eurocentricity and all in the service of egocentricity. We're in a certain way blinded by external light. And so there's this vast natural resource that we have that our parents, our culture, our society just dismisses because, if we can't experience it fully, it can't be real. Well, how about perhaps it's more real? How about perhaps that just because it's subtle and nocturnal and dark, that in fact it could be exploring exactly what you're referring to, the origins of everything. Origins often arise in darkness. And so for you, it's just a complete kind of recapitulation of the whole dismissive attitude that the Western world has around lucid dreaming, and for you to be, the intrepid pioneer that you have been and continue to be is amazing. So were you ever, Claire, when you were engaging in this, I'm very curious in terms of the kind of the dance between, being so excited, thrilled about exploring this unique world pretty much on your own, And also the role of fear. If there were,
Hmm.
in fact, some experiences that weren't all just love and light, that were expressions
Yeah.
of shadow that also came to teach you. So talk to us a little bit about how you danced between those two extremes, we could say, the great excitation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, fear. This is this is a topic I'm also fascinated by, and in my workshops, I try to teach people how to release fear because I believe that fear is the biggest, or it can be the biggest block when it comes to not only psychological development but also spiritual knowledge. And I think that when we are brave and when we face the fear, oh, there's so much to gain. I mean, I think of nightmares these days. I think of nightmares as being healing gifts. You know, we can unwrap them and get to the gift. What is it that they're teaching us? What can we learn from them? This is a step on our path towards healing. But way back then, I mean, obviously, as a child growing up, I had really scary nightmares sometimes. I remember one recurring lucid nightmare. So I was conscious in this dream, but I didn't know about lucid dreaming. I didn't know that you can actually change things or kind of snap out of it or wake yourself up if you need to. I didn't know any of that. And I had this recurring nightmare. It started off quite amazing. I climbed up to a hill, a green hill, and it was drenched in sunlight. And then I lay down on the hill and everything was wonderful. The sky was blue. And then suddenly, all these power lines, these like buzzing black lines, started to crisscross the sky, like really kind of vibrating with energy that scared me because it was so strong. And they crossed the sky and crossed it and crossed it until the sky was black and everything was black buzzing.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I would scream because I was so scared. Even though I knew it was a dream, I would scream and I would try and wake myself up. And I remember telling my mum about that, and I was only little, so all I could really say was, "Mum, I had a dream, and there were all these lines crossing the sky," and she was like, "Yeah, all right, darling." You know, I mean, it just doesn't sound that impressive. I had no way of kind of putting into words how huge that dream was for me, and the massive vibration of those lines and the sense that I was going to lift off and be transported somewhere else and I didn't know where and there was a lot of fear. So I had to learn to get through those experiences and I got used to those because they were recurring nightmares, those ones. And I kind of managed to stay relaxed because I knew I always wake up safely from this. I always wake up safely in my bed. And then I would just have to kind of stay there and see it through. And I mean, I think looking back, these were just kind of out of body experiences because I did have out of body experiences when I was younger. And, you know, you often get that huge vibration and the sense of liftoff. But again, I had no idea what was going on. And so that was just one example of the fear that I sometimes experienced in those states. And I felt that I had no real help with that. But the great thing is that then you get to draw on your own inner resources.
Mm.
And I found that my dreams would also be like my regular dreams would give me such wonderful, beautiful experiences that I was never really scared to sleep. It was interesting. I looked forward to it. It was like going straight into a rich other world full of colors and different things and amazing people and animals, you know. So there were always both sides for me. And I just had to learn to kind of brave up really and just be like, right, okay, whatever happens, I'll wake up safely. That was kind of my maxim, you know?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's really amazing. And you know, for me, not only as a spelunker of the mind in terms of the nocturnal practices, you know, in my meditative path altogether, I have often used fear as one of the most powerful indicators for where one actually should go to grow. I often talk about
Yeah.
how, you know, Joseph Campbell, when he said, follow your bliss, there's some provisional
Hmm.
truth to that. But if you only follow your bliss, you just get blissed out. And so for
Yeah.
me, I actually find the most rewarding things I've ever done is following my fear. And you know, I've explored this in some depth, Claire, where you know, the very origin of the word fear comes from a root that means fair, as in toll. And so
Hmm.
it's as if it really is the kind of gauntlet that authentic deep divers of the mind and heart have to go through in order to discover reality. And I've thought about this a ton. And to me, it's why it's super important to understand the kind of the strata of mind, have a really good map of the mind that yes, we may have these intermediate bandwidths that the Buddhist tradition refers to as the kind of the substrate consciousness, where all the refused, rejected aspects are spiders and snakes are hanging out. And if we get kind of deterred by the spiders and snakes at the intermediate level, we're going to lose the deeper picture. And so the complete picture, as you know, is that at the very basis, at least according to so-called non-dual Eastern traditions, at the very basis, the true bed of mind is perfectly pure. It's divine. It was what I refer to in the nocturnal practices. And of course, it's not my term, as the clear light mind. And so I'm riffing on this just a little bit because it's so important that if we know that the very ground of our being, below the spiders and snakes are the sages and saints, that below that is the real divinity, the purity, the God within, whatever metaphor you want to use, then that will allow us to, in fact, cut through these otherwise frightful situations that are extraordinarily effective in terms of keeping us away from truth. And so how do you work with it now? What new kind of skill sets do you bring when you're relating to fear? Because I know you write quite a bit about nightmares and using lucidity in working with nightmares. How can you share with us what you found most fruitful in that respect?
Well, I mean, I think, what you're saying is fascinating. It sounds like you've really kind of been there as well, and you've worked through the fear, and it's so important to do that. It can seem so scary, can't it, to face things, but when you do it, you reap the benefits. And as I got deeper into lucid dreaming, I had experience after experience where every time I faced something awful in my dreams, there would be this radiance that would follow, absolute radiance, and a sense of like, I've got through it, and I'm stronger, and I have this resource. And I think we all have this light within us. Of course we do, this healing capacity, and yet we get far away from it, and the fear takes us further away. We stay in our mind and build up the fear even more, and turn it into something huge, and are scared to face it. So what I try to do in my practical workshops is teach people how we can use transformative lucidity techniques during the day, during our waking hours, to work with our dreams. And in fact, it's like a waking version of lucid dreaming.
Yes.
And the more we do this kind of dream work while awake, the easier it is to do it then automatically in a lucid dream, to work with the scary dream figure. And there are so many possibilities. I developed the lucid imaging nightmare solution, which is a waking technique, but it happens like once you've woken up from a nightmare, you can then go back into your dream. First of all, you calm yourself down, of course, knowing that you can stop the process at any time. And if you feel that you're ready to go back into that nightmare in a visualization, you just relax in your bed, and you recall the dream imagery as far back as you can. And what's really good to do is kind of rerun it like a movie, and then try and identify the tipping point, which is the moment when the dream turned into a nightmare. There's often like a moment where everything was more or less okay, and then suddenly you open the cupboard and a monster jumps out, something like that. So it's very easy there to see when it turns into a nightmare. So if you return to that tipping point as if this is a movie, your dream or your nightmare is a movie, and you can go back to that tipping point, and then you try to restore the balance. You can decide whereabouts you want to change events or change your attitude towards events. We don't have to forcibly manipulate the dream imagery at all. We can just draw on the possibilities of lucid dreaming. So, for example, we could offer a gift to the nasty or scary element of our dream. This can be really amazing. It's often a surprise, the kind of thing that turns up when you offer them a gift. Or you can surrender and just see what's going to happen. Like if you had a horrible dream about zombies, you think they're going to rip you to pieces, and then you go back into the dream and you say, well, okay, I know I'm safe. I'm just going to see what happens. And then perhaps instead of really trying to rip you to pieces. The zombies surround you like angels and beam healing light over you, or something like that may happen. And it's really good to just see, to allow your unconscious to work with these images and with your lucid awareness sort of mixed in with it, and see kind of what can happen. You could also ask the dream for a gift. You could hug the dream monster. You can put a protective shield around yourself so that you feel that you are absolutely safe and protected if the fear seems too big. And you can ask if the dream or the nightmare has a message for you. This is often very interesting, the kind of responses you get. So one lady, for example, she had recurring nightmares about being chased by scary men, and she was a very anxious person in her waking life as well. And someone said to her, well, you know, next time that nightmare happens, ask them why they're chasing you. And she actually managed to do this. She was being chased by a big giant with glowing blue eyes. And she turned around and said, why are you chasing me? And the moment she said that, he shrank down to like a normal size and looked very helpless and sorry. And he said, oh, you need us for your fear.
Beautiful.
And yeah, right. And so she realized, wow, I'm actually, part of me is kind of creating this because I've got so fearful. I've got into a fearful mindset and I'm making these scary things happen. And that for her really turned her life around, because not only did those recurring nightmares never come back, but she became less fearful in her waking life. So what we do in lucid dreams, and when we change our attitude, it can actually change our attitude towards our waking life. And when our attitude and our outlook changes, our life changes for the better.
Oh, that's just fantastic. I mean, so many terrific insights here, Claire. I mean, the last thing you said, and this is the, large charter of my entire um, path, and also my teaching on this material, is this bidirectional approach. That exactly what you said, that what we do under the cover of darkness isn't left under the cover of darkness. It can ping in this bidirectional way back into our daily lives to help us inform and then transform the way we live. But a number of things really came to mind when you were talking about this. One is, I often riff on this thing from the Nando Shaiva Tantra traditions, completely resonant with my deep study of Tibetan Buddhism, where they fundamentally say, they're. Whoa, what was that?
Oh, did we just?
I think we're still there. It just sounded like a big demon just crossed our stage. There's a dream sign.
Oh.
We should all just
What's
jump
that nightmare? We're talking about the fear. That's why.
Yeah, that was awesome. Did you hear it as well?
No, I heard silence.
Oh, I heard this big, like, freaky sound. So anyway, maybe it's just coming from my own mind. But within the Nando Shaiva tradition, they have this beautiful maxim where they assert, there is no darkness within, only light unseen. And I think just having that vision itself is beautiful. And I want to see how this bounces off of you. When I think about nightmares, I think there's two fundamental things going on. One is that a large part of what's taking place in the kind of psychological arena is that these rejected, refused, unwanted aspects of our experience are really coming back for reintegration, for individuation, even, and for wholeness. They're really, it's like a boomerang that you threw when you rejected your experience is coming back to be whole, to be healed. And there was originally unwanted, is going to come back as unwanted, anthropomorphized or otherwise symbolized in the dream. And if we continue to run from it, we continue to, in a certain way, run away from parts of ourselves, which then keep chasing after us. And so what you say is exactly what I've done, Claire, is that very often, and I haven't had a nightmare in probably 25, 30 years because of this practice. When I did, I would just stop because I had some sense of what was happening. I would turn around. I would either ask the monster directly or just face it and open my heart and hug it. And eventually, it would either dissolve into light or dissolve into my heart. I would wake up lighter, freer, and then eventually these rejected aspects disappeared. And so my experience is that's the psychological component of nightmares. But even deeper is that the fundamental essence of a nightmare, as I've come to see it, night or day, and this is where it's even more compelling during the day, is the nightmare of reification altogether. That's the fundamental nightmare. Taking things to be reified, to be solid, independent, and real. That's the real nightmare. of which these psychological components are just kind of epiphenomenal. And so to me, the great gift, and this is why I teach so much on death and dying, this kind of maxim that has been a large part of my life is, transforming obstacle into opportunity, this kind of alchemical approach, this kind of tantric approach. And I'm mentioning this to our listeners then, so that when you have these fearful experiences and you realize that fear is the fare, that from a psychospiritual developmental point of view, it's actually a really good thing. That now you have this tremendously precious, if not unwanted from an egoic perspective, opportunity to really integrate, to heal and bring these disparate rejected aspects into your experience. And so we solve the psychological components, and then through understanding the fundamental nightmare of reification altogether, we fundamentally solve, as in dissolve, the nightmare of reification altogether. So does that resonate with your own experience working with this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does. I mean, everything you're saying makes perfect sense. I'm completely on the same page as you with this. I mean, I find that nightmares, they can also, I mean, they can be due to a sense of a spiritual chasm sometimes in people. I get a lot of people writing to me via my website who are very desperate. It's quite remarkable how many people there are out there who are really suffering in life.
Yeah.
And I write back to every single one of them, because I really see that as my role, just to try and help where I can. I mean, I get people writing to me and saying they're having recurring nightmares every night. They're scared to go to sleep. And they say to me things like, I think I'm going mad, or else they say, please help me to get my life back. I mean, there are some really, really desperate situations going on. Sometimes it's to do with sleep paralysis. Sometimes, of course, it's to do with past traumas that are coming back to haunt people. I mean, of course, I say to them, though, these traumas are rising to consciousness because, it's maybe time to work with them and to get on the path towards healing. But there's only so much you can do kind of via email, as you know. I mean, I'm sure you get a lot of people writing to you as well. And, I just do my best to help where I can. But I do see that for some people, there's a sense of spiritual loss, or a lack of spirituality in their lives, or a sense of it's all just going to end at death and life is completely pointless, that kind of thing. And then there are people who write with psychological nightmares, as we've talked about. And also nightmares can have a physical cause. Some people who have chronic pain, for example, this is something I'm going to be looking at in my next book on nightmares, how the physical body can also affect what we dream about. And some people have a sleep disturbance, which is a bit like sleep apnea, but not as bad. So it's not like so it's not kind of the really full-on form, but there's a milder form where you still, your dreams will be affected. You may find you dream you're drowning in quicksand, or someone's strangling you or something, because you've got not enough air going down your windpipe. And so that there's all sorts of ways of getting to the root of nightmares and helping people. But I think it's fascinating to see the way that people can heal so much in such a short space of time in their dreams. I mean, I've experienced this myself when I've gone through very difficult things in my life, and I've had a horrible nightmare that I really don't want to have, and it's awful and all this, and then I've gone back and I have faced it in my next in the next time it comes up. I become lucid and I face it, and it's just amazing how the dream can spontaneously dissolve into light, and how there is so much healing just in the space of just a few seconds. And I think it's wonderful to know that we all have this power to heal ourselves. We all have that inside us, and there's this tendency, isn't there, to look to external things or people, but actually, when we have the right tools and we're ready for it, we feel like, yeah, I'm going to be brave, I'm going to face this. We can do so much work and transform on extremely deep levels by working with our dreams.
Yes, and isn't it also that, the analogy I use, it's like and this is why, of course, I'm one of the many reasons I'm so jazzed about these practices, is that we're working, the analogy I use, Claire, is we're really working with the tectonic plates of our experience, the very ground, the roots of our mind. And so, as you know, in your own work and studying the literature, when we're working with such foundational levels, the slightest shifts down there can have massive surface implications and repercussions. And so I want to transition. I mean, oh my gosh, we could talk about this forever. But you're one of the few people, and I think this will be just to go to the other spectrum of what's available in the dream arena. You're one of the few researchers, writers who talks, I think, quite eloquently and beautifully about sex in lucid dreams. And let's, if you don't mind going there, because there aren't too many. Most of the guys I talk to are heavy-hitting researchers and scholars, and so to talk to you about, I guess you could say on one level, this is truly safe sex, but is it? Is it? So you talk in your book, you have this beautiful chapter on what is it, from orgasms to ethics, and so talk to us a little bit about sex in dreams, both lucid and non-lucid, because of course if we ping this on the webinar, this will draw thousands of people to this.
That's
but
true.
Really, but you're one of the few people that has really looked into this, and so I really want to, let's dive into this one a little bit, much more.
Yeah, I think I think you're right. It's good to cover topics that not everybody covers, for sure. I mean, I've never really understood why many lucid dream authors kind of tend to completely avoid the subject of sex, or don't kind of delve into it in terms of ethics either. But it's really fascinating. I mean, and it's a very normal human thing, the sexual urge is absolutely natural. And many people have very erotic experiences in their lucid dreams. I mean, I don't know if you've read Patricia Garfield's books.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, she would basically just burst into orgasm almost as soon as she got lucid in her dreams. It was very much linked to sex for her. So the interesting thing, I think, is that obviously a lot of people, they want to experiment with sex, and that can be a big drive for people to get lucid, because they want to go and have sex with loads of different people in their dreams. But I think what's interesting, really for me, is the ethics of lucid dream sex. It's quite interesting to see how this comes out in a lucid dream. Some people, even when they're lucid in a dream, they'll be like, oh, I know this is a dream, but I can't do anything sexual because I'm married, and what would my wife say? Kind of this. So we can still have a very strong sense of ethics in our dreams. But yeah, the interesting thing for me is when, and sort of disturbing in one way, is when I read on lucid dreaming forums about people just sort of, raping other people in their lucid dreams. So acts of violence in lucid dreams. And I listen to the reasoning, and it's like, this is my dream. I can do whatever I want. These are just figments of my imagination. I can shoot them, kill them, rape them, all that sort of reasoning comes out, which, I mean, on one level, okay, it's a form of reasoning, but I think anyone who's gone more deeply into lucid dreaming would not necessarily agree that that everything in a dream is a figment of the imagination, and that there are zero repercussions when we think about our actions in a lucid dream. I think that this often happens, that people say, oh, if you rape in a dream, you're more likely to rape someone in real life, for example. So that would be the opposite end of the spectrum, that whole argument. Or people will say, well, no, dream rape can't hurt anyone, and it doesn't make more people more likely to rape in waking life. So there's all these arguments that come in. I mean, for me, it's really, I feel like people who have a greater degree of psychological insight might say, well, actually, dreams are part of my psyche, and I respect everything that manifests in my psyche, and I do have a certain responsibility, in a sense, to be more compassionate, and these things, the way we act in our dreams, it does carry on over into waking life to an extent, maybe not to the extent of going out and hurting somebody in waking life, but it still has an impact, because every thought that we think has an impact on our waking reality, on our dreaming reality. And I think that for me, it's like the dream is not only part of our individual psyche, but we all are part of this universal psyche. So everything we do, the energy we create, the thoughts that we think, whether we're awake or asleep, that all contributes to the state of the universal psyche. So it's something interesting to think about, you know. I mean, what do you think, Andrew? Do you think it
Yeah.
matters, or
Oh
what
yeah,
are your thoughts?
without a doubt. That's why I wanted to talk to you about it. And you know, with all the guests, you're my first. And when I read your stuff on this, I said, oh my gosh, she's the perfect one to talk to. So yes, a number of things, and I'd love to hear what you think about it. First of all, I think when people think that they may reason their way out of what they're doing, it's not reasoning as much as it is just rationalization. And so there's so much to say here. One is that certainly a large part of what I do, as you probably know, is based on the so-called Eastern traditions, Eastern thought practice. And in the Eastern way of looking at things, wherever intention is involved, even at the level of a dream, karma is created. Habit. I mean, karma is just an Eastern word for habit. And so using the tenets of neuroplasticity, just to throw a little bit of a scientific tinge to it, and also for those listeners who are students of inner yoga, what I refer to as nadi plasticity, how it's not just neural structures, but also a subtle body structure that can be changed. As you well know from your own work, Claire, that what we do with our mind affects our brain, affects our body.
Yeah.
So it's not just, again, kept under the darkness of the unconscious mind. That's both a blessing and the curse. And so, as you're pointing out to it, when you're engaged in violence in your dreams, and first of all, that in itself, another tremendous arena, is not only from a psychological perspective, ever since Freud, dreams as truth tellers, but in the world of dream yoga, the maxim, the moniker for dream yoga is the measure of the path. So dreams are revelatory. Dreams are sometimes painfully revelatory, and they will reveal to you these unconscious tendencies. And so that's tremendous good news for those of us who have the courage to look at these revelations, and obviously not so good news for those who want to indulge in it. And so I think what it reveals, like with people who rape in their dreams and engage in violent tendencies, it's exactly what you're saying. You're being violent towards the deeper dimensions of your own mind, because I often pose this as a reflective question to people, is like, when you're working with your dreams, what are you working with? What are dreams made of? Well, there's no pre-existing landscape objectified in there. It's your mind. You're working with your mind. And so the biggest thing, and I often bring this up, and is that it's one of the real shadow sides with the heavy marketing with lucid dreaming now, that it's the ultimate in self-fulfillment, fulfill your wildest fantasies within the sanctuary of your own mind. But, they don't read the small print, of course, and I'm just saying this tongue in cheek, that wherever intention is involved, habit is created. And so I toss this out there so that when people engage in this, you have to realize there are repercussions, not only individually. And I love, Claire, what you said about the cosmic collective. And my dear friend Ken Wilber writes about this really powerfully in his book Integral Spirituality, where he draws on, so much draws on the challenging work of Rupert Sheldrake and morphogenetic fields and the like, that what we do with every thought we have, whether we know it or not, it's part of the collective soup, and what we do really does affect the collective matrix, because it's only at these superficial dimensions that we feel we're separate entities. At the very foundations of our being, we're all one. And I mean, I'll just toss this in very deeply as a sidebar, because it's well beyond our scope, but this is even implicated in these revolutionary ideas in physics called quantum entanglement. So it's not just spiritual metaphysical rhetoric here. We're talking about deep foundational tenets that they provide a great sense of responsibility, that what we say, think, do, and act not only affects ourselves and those around us, but it creates a signature, an imprint in this deeper collective unconscious, and then even deeper collective superconscious mind. So everything you say, my dear, is just spot on. So with that said, advise us, counsel us about really safe sex. Obviously not just on the sense of not getting an STD, but
Mm-hmm.
really to engage in the dream state, in this type of union, because fundamentally that's that's representing. Maybe give us some parental advice. Give us the birds and bees. Dear Billy, today we're going to talk about the birds and the bees. Talk to us a little bit about the best ways to have truly safe sex in the dream state, and honor this experience.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that I always try to do, I mean, I never want to kind of set myself up as someone who kind of knows more than other people in that sense. I mean, I don't want to be like the thought police, you know, I don't want to say, hey, you know, this is right and this is wrong. I have my own views, as you've heard, but I think everyone has their own journey. One guy wrote to me and he said, oh, he's, you know, one of these people who goes out and takes a machine gun into his lucid dreams and mows everybody down or rapes a few dream figures. I mean, it's really whew. And he said to me, I know that I can do all this because it's just a dream and they're just figments of my imagination. So why do I wake up feeling so bad in the morning? And I thought, you see, but this is part of his journey, isn't it, Andrew? I mean, it's like he's gone through that, and now he's got to the point where he's saying, well, hang on, if it's okay, as perhaps his friends are telling him, why do I wake up feeling morally bad in the morning? And then he's come to me because he saw, I don't know, an article I wrote on lucid dream sex or something, or he read my book, and he wants to ask me that question. And then I think this is really good because this person is ready to hear another possibility. And I also get people saying to me, I have to rape my lucid dream figures because otherwise they won't have sex with me.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Honestly, I swear, these are people write to me all the time with these kind of dilemmas, you know. And that's the second case is someone who hasn't understood one of the golden rules of lucid dreaming, which is the magic power of expectation. You know, he's intending to have dream sex, but you know, everything's going wrong. So he decides, no, I really am going to do this, and forces things. But he needs to, if he wants to have happy, consensual, lucid dream sex in that sense, then he needs to expect a willing dream partner, and then everything will go more easily. So people sometimes, they just need more information about how lucid dreaming really works, so they can experiment and then make an informed decision about how they personally want to behave in their dreams. So I answer these people who come to me, and I try and meet them at a point that they can take one more step, perhaps in a nicer direction, like towards more compassion or more healing thing. And I teach them then about expectation. So expect to have a wonderful erotic encounter with the girl or the boy of your choice, you know, and also respect them. Be kind, be respectful, because that is when amazing things happen in lucid dreams, you know. If you go in there and you change your attitude, so you're not saying, this is my playground, this is my video game, I'll do whatever I want. If you change that into like, okay, I'm going to be kind and respectful, I'm going to listen to my dream figures, I'm going to engage in a compassionate way with my dream environment, then that's when the magic happens in lucid dreams, because your dreaming mind is you. I mean, you are your dreams and your dreams are you. So they can respond. You can have this wonderful conversation with your dreaming mind. And also, if you incubate an erotic lucid dream, that's a good way of having the kind of lucid sex dream that you want. Visualize the dream figures thinking sex is a great idea, you know, so that things go well. And you could use a power word or a gesture to kind of make magic, to make things happen in the dream, all those usual kind of lucid dreaming things. But I think one of the important things is, and I often respond to people like this, I say, ask yourself, who am I when I dream? You know, do I want to act aggressively? Do I want to act with kindness? Am I ready to listen and respond? Well, obviously, you know this, the Buddhists say that to find out how the mind will be in death, see how the mind is in dreams. And we are responsible to some extent for our reactions, our actions, and, you know, whether we're awake or asleep. So if we can practice kindness in all states of consciousness, you know, because every state of consciousness is important, then we will find it easier to be kind in waking life. We understand that we are all one and we're all part of this amazing cosmos.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Claire, that's just so beautiful. Several things came to mind. One is, and I'm sure you know that this is one of the reasons that Carl Jung, who was probably one of the most sophisticated dreamers of the last century, was somewhat hesitant to endorse lucid dreaming because he realized the potential for self-aggrandizement, for psychological abuse.
Yeah.
And we see these sorts of things. And so to me, you really brought up some interesting things that in a very real way, again, using this idea that what are dreams made of, and pardon my French here, and pardon the language to my listeners, but when you're fucking something in your dreams, what are you really doing? You're fucking with your mind. You're fucking yourself. You're messing around, screwing with your mind. And so, what you're saying is so beautiful that instead of this aggressive tendency towards your own self that you're simply objectifying in these ways, you can use this to literally learn how to make love to yourself, how you can train and change the fundamental in Buddhist cosmology, Claire. They talk that in the human dimension, we live in what's referred to as the realm of desire, the realm of passion. It's the principal kind of emotion that drives what we do. I mean, everything fundamentally is driven by passion and desire. And so when we work with things like sex, we're basically just working with the archetypal expression of that very energy, which, as you know, in the deep inner tantric yoga practices, the inner heat practices, the very, very distorted, misunderstood kind of notion of tantric sex. The fundamental idea is you're transforming the heat of passion into the warmth of compassion. And so this is the parental advice. This is the parental advice that I'm hearing you say, is that yes, the passion is there. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But again, in this alchemical way, look into the real nature of that passion. What are you trying to fundamentally unite with? And how does that perverted kind of energy of unification get distorted into this aggression? And then take that same energy. This is real tantra. This is real alchemy. Take that same energy, explore it deeply, centrifuge out the rejected egoic elements, and then the next time you have sex with yourself, you are literally learning how to love your mind. I mean, to me, this is one of my favorite. This is one of my favorite definitions for meditation these days, and I think it would apply to therapy. Is that learn how children, which include, I should say, thoughts and dreams, because my maxim is that thoughts are to waking consciousness as dreams are to dreaming consciousness. These are the children of your mind. You give birth to these children, and so unless you're a little bit wigged out and confused, like some of the suffering people you're referring to, you want to love your children. And so I often say in my meditation instruction, and also with lucid nightmare therapy things, is learn how to open your heart, mind, and learn how to love your mind. And that's the way you hug it, you embrace it, and then you transform these untoward energies into real energies of compassion and kindness. So,
yeah, exactly. And I'm very glad that you brought up that point, because this is something that I also really feel strongly about and teach, is that it's good to love yourself, it's good to care for yourself, it's good to appreciate yourself, and it's like this whole thing about having compassion for yourself. So many people in the world, they're very, very harsh with themselves, and they've got onto a path where they respond perhaps with violence or with negativity or anger. And it's just so good when people understand on a deep level that, it's actually really okay. It's more than okay. It's brilliant to love yourself and feel compassionate for yourself. And I believe that lucid dreaming can really, really help us to reach that conclusion, because we can experience that in the very interactive environment of the lucid dream, where all our thoughts and emotions get kind of instantly transmogrified into streams of imagery, so we can see the workings of our mind, and we can see how everything we think and feel impacts our reality. And that is a wonderful lesson for lucid living, one that we can bring into our waking lives, so that we can react to difficult events with more more compassion, and everything flows more harmoniously when we feel that compassion and that love, and we are more able to help other people as well when we have that sense of love and compassion for ourselves. So it's win-win, you know. It's a win-win situation.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it true that we express towards others what we express towards ourselves? And so if we can use the dreaming state as a kind of laboratory of the heart mind, where we can become more familiar with who we really are. And then the word, as you know, metta or maitri, this development of tremendous kindness towards others, what the Dalai Lama refers to as inner disarmament, learning how to transform relationship to the contents of our own mind, especially these somewhat challenging contents and experiences. And then by natural extension, again, in this kind of bidirectional way, then we just naturally start to extend this. And then to me, it's, I playfully use this idea, Claire, that we know what it's like to wake up on the wrong side of the bed and how that can color our experience, like what some of these people earlier were sharing with you. I find that these practices of lucid dreaming and the other nocturnal practices, in fact, show us how to wake up on the right side of the bed every morning, so that we bring the radiance of our nighttime experience, we allow it to perfume our day, and then fundamentally, we allow it to perfume the entirety of our lives. And so let me ask you this along these lines, Claire. This issue of control in dreams, it's such a sparky topic in the literature. And some people say, oh, you shouldn't control your dreams. You should let the messages come up, and maybe perhaps work with interpretation. The yogic traditions have a different approach, and I will share with you what my understanding is. But I'm very curious how you now relate to this issue of dream control. Because again, if we come back to this maxim that when you were talking about dream control, we're really talking about mind control. What does that really mean? And where do you come down on this topic? What is your view on this notion of should we control our dreams? And in fact, to what extent do we have control? How much can we control?
Yeah, I mean, I always say to people, because you often get people who come and say, lucid dreaming is all about control, and I don't like control and all this. And I say to them, hey, it's perfectly possible just to become lucid in your dream and go with the flow. You don't have to try and control anything. It's just as in waking life, you can go with the flow of things, or you can decide to guide events. So it's not all about control by any means. And there's this great spontaneity in the dreaming mind, which is something absolutely, utterly magical that we discover as we go more deeply into lucid dreaming. That even if you're kind of really quite guiding events in quite a specific way, something surprising and amazing will always come up. And give you an example from my little daughter. She was having dreams about scary witches, and I told her, about the basic options that you can do in a lucid dream. I said, you could make friends with them, or you could fly off, or you do whatever you want. Just see how you want to react in the dream. And I also said you could give them a gift. And so she had the dream again about the scary witches, and this time she stood and faced them. And she gave them a baby witch doll. Yeah. And as soon as the witches held onto this little baby witch doll, this is the surprising, amazing thing, it turned into a real live witch baby.
Oh, wow.
And they were just astounded, and so was Yasmin, my daughter. And everything was wonderful. They all sat down and had a picnic, and there were cupcakes, and they were in a forest, and it was all just perfect. And she told me about this dream upon waking, and she never had the scary witch dreams again, but she had now made allies in her dreams. She had powerful friends to help her, and she'd seen the way that although she was kind of guiding the dream in a sense, giving them a gift and not being scared and standing her ground and knowing she could wake up if she wanted, suddenly this amazing spontaneous thing happens which transforms the dream. And lucid dreaming is like that. It happens all the time. I mean, I've done experiments when I was doing my doctoral research into lucid dreaming. I did experiments to see how far can we control a dream, and how far can we not control it. I mean, how does it go? So in one dream I decided I'm going to do absolutely nothing. I'm not even going to think a guiding thought, right? I'm just going to stand here. I was in some woods with some flowers, and I'm just going to observe the dream. And so I stood there and I looked around and everything was lovely, a little breeze in the trees and all that. And I looked down and I saw this red buttercup. And I was like, oh, a red buttercup. And part of me kind of thought, oh, buttercups are usually yellow. But I thought, well, I'm not going to think about that. So I looked away, looked around, looked back down, and guess what? The buttercup had turned yellow to fit in with my expectations that buttercups should be yellow. And I was like, damn it, here's me trying not to do anything. And then that's, I really realized, hey, we are the lucid dream, and the lucid dream is us. And every thought we think, even a really quiet little thought about a buttercup, will be picked up on by the dream, because it's a thought responsive environment. So and so is a regular dream is absolutely a thought responsive environment as well. As soon as we get scared in a regular dream, it turns worse. It gets even scarier, and that's the way it is. It's like a mirror. So, but once you realize that you are intricately and intimately involved in your dream, it's not a separate thing that you can control or not control in that sense. It's like it's totally responsive. It's like telepathy. Once you realize that, then the whole idea of dream control takes on a different meaning, I think.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think this is what sometimes is pointed towards as the topic of lucid solipsism. That this is where this is the arena where we can really witness the role of the mind as a magnificent creator. And I find it infinitely fascinating, because to me, this is where the definition of lucid dreaming as a hybrid state of consciousness, this rare, refined state where the conscious mind can face the unconscious mind directly. Claire, I find that just breathtaking, because, as you know, ever since Freud, and even before, one could argue that Freud fundamentally discovered the unconscious mind, at least for the Western world. Backstage runs on stage. We think we run so-called conscious lives, but the vast majority of what we do are run by unconscious processes. It's like, I think, psychological interpretation of what Christ said, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And so when when we're working with these states, and especially when I wake up and I'm having like a hyperlucid dream, I wake up and I'm going, ooh, tonight's a good one. I'm like, it's really clear, it's really stable. And then for me, with the stages of kind of dream yoga that I've articulated and what I play with, I will automatically jump to the highest stages, because it's like, whoa, now we've got a little bit of subtlety involved. And to me, the opportunity to explore these deepest aspects of the unconscious mind are the most rewarding parts. And of course, and this is what I want to transition into with you, is we start to go from the shallow end of the pool to the deeper end. What you refer to as deep lucid dreaming. I love it. Deep lucid diving is when we can then transition not only to what the psychologists refer to as the unconscious mind, but what the wisdom traditions refer to as the super unconscious mind. What I was alluding to earlier is a clear light mind. And you're one of the few writers, and this is where I love to start to transition with you, that talks about the lucid light, the void, which is utterly confluent, resonant with what my tradition refers to as Bardo yoga and luminosity yoga. But I would love to hear if you think we're done with this thing on dream control.
Sure.
Obviously, there's so much more we could say about that. but share with us some of your experiences, if you would, with the so-called lucid light, how that first entered your dream arena, and what that experience actually might have been for you. Are you okay talking a little bit about this?
Absolutely, yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, for me, I guess over time I started to realize, as I began to face down my nightmares and see what happened when I relaxed and went with the flow, I would find more and more light seeping into my dreams. It could come, for example, in the form of two suns in the sky, or two moons, or else a dissolution into light, so that my whole dream body would dissolve and the dream itself would dissolve and everything would become light. And as I continued to experiment, this was, I guess I was in my early 20s, I started to meditate in lucid dreams. Yeah, and that is so amazing. I recommend it to absolutely anybody, because it's so much easier to meditate in a lucid dream than it is in the waking state, you know. When we meditate in a lucid dream, almost instantly, what tends to happen for me and other people I know who have done this is that you instantly go into a super deep meditative state. The dream falls away, you may even lose your dream body, so what, you know, and you just go deep very, very fast. I think it's the fastest ever way to go into an incredibly deep state of meditative consciousness, which brings you right into the heart of what I call the lucid light.
Yeah.
And when I first started doing this, I used to, you know, I would sit down cross-legged with a straight spine and take a deep breath and close my eyes, you know, all that sort of stuff. But I quickly learned that you don't even need to do that in a lucid dream. Right. You don't need to do that. You don't have to use a body. You don't need the dream body, you know. And so you can just have this intention, a pure intention, to meditate in your lucid dream, and then all this stuff will just happen, you know. And it's just incredible how much you can learn from that state. I remember once I actually meditated with this really old woman in my dreams. She was really powerful. You know how sometimes you become lucid and some dream figures are just like, you see that they're like super awake. They're really aware dream figures. They're the ones, of course, to go towards and find out what's, you know, what they've got in store for you if they have something to teach you. And this woman, I was in a crowded auditorium, and I became lucid just like that for no real reason. Looked around the room and bam, you know, our eyes met, and I was like, wow. And as soon as she looked at me with that conscious gaze, she turned around and left the auditorium. And so, of course, I followed her. And we went into this back room, which was all white with two kind of like massage beds on it, kind of, you know, not proper beds, but kind of more like massage beds and everything in white. And she went onto one of the beds and lay down, folded her arms across her chest and closed her eyes. And I was like, okay. So I got onto the other bed and did the same thing. And immediately, bam, I was in this super deep meditation. I was like, wow, this woman's powerful. She's done this for me. She's put me in this super deep state. And in fact, well, in that dream, it was quite a difficult dream in some ways, because she showed me some images which were pretty disturbing and which I felt as well in my body, like being pressed down by a gravestone, things like that. And I realized at the time, with the sinking feeling, that these were images of the future, something that was going to happen. But at the same time, she was showing me, you have the strength to get through this. And I don't know, it was like a kind of spiritual companion or something. And I came out of that dream knowing, okay, things are going to get crazy, and I have to be very strong. And those things did happen in waking life, and I had to be very strong for them. And I meditated, and that helped me to get through them, because I had already connected to what she had shown me, this really, really deep meditative space. So I kind of went off topic there with that dream, but
that's good.
I guess what I'm saying is, I started to meditate in my lucid dreams and went deeper, and I began to have incredible experiences of dissolving into light, and it made me realize that, in fact, there is luminosity beneath all appearances.
That's right.
Any expression of matter, there is this incredible luminosity, and we are that luminosity. We are it, and it is us, and there is no me or it. It's just all one. And when you reach that state in lucid dreams, it's just wonderful. It's very sort of, it's like finding the source of everything. I see the lucid light as being, it's something that is present everywhere we are, and it's also the baseline state of consciousness. That's how I think of it. It's not, the baseline state of consciousness is not the waking state. It's actually the lucid light. It's the light from which all forms of matter emerged. It's this original alive light from which all states of consciousness, all energy, matter, and physical forms has emerged. And I think of it as, just being there all the time, but particularly easy to access in lucid dreams, because in a lucid dream, like I say, you can lose your body in a couple of seconds or even less, you know, and you can go into this light. And some of the experiences, what I've done in my dreams as well is I've asked about what dreams are made of. And in one dream, I became lucid in a room, and I remembered I wanted to ask this question. I said, "Oh, what are dreams made of?" I just asked the dream. And suddenly there was like this huge kind of earthquake feeling. Everything started to judder and fall apart. And I'm so familiar with that from my lucid dreams that I just laughed and I was like, yeah, okay, dreams are made of energy. I get it. And I said, but tell me this, what is energy made from?
Okay.
Immediately, all the juddering stopped. And there was just like these luminous chains of light that came in from all directions and filled the dream space. And it was so beautiful. And I said, wow, I was just totally overawed. And I said, okay, so energy is made from light.
Right.
And that, for me, that was just like a personal, a personal question that I asked. But everything seemed to be taking me to this light. And I think it's pure conscious awareness. It's like the energy of the universe and beyond. It's the oneness that binds everything together. And I know that you have a lot of experience with this as well through the practice of sleep yoga.
Right. Yeah. This is, now you're hitting my sweet spots because, I'm just sitting here nodding my head so fast it's going to fall off my shoulders. And it's just beautiful. But let me ask you a couple questions, Claire, before I just make a few little kind of supportive statements on that. What tradition of meditation are you kind of trained in, or what is your experience? Because when people talk about meditation these days, to me, meditation is like the word sports. There's probably 500 sports, and there's probably 500 different types of meditation. So for our listeners, I'm curious, when you say you meditate in your dreams, can you be a little bit more specific about the actual type of practice that you're doing?
Oh, yeah, sure. For me, I'm a yoga teacher, and I trained in the Shivananda tradition of Hatha yoga. Kind of, I guess there, we did meditation there with mantras or without mantras, and I very quickly brought that into my dreams. So I just basically I observe what's happening in my mind without getting too attached to it, and I go deeper. I just let it all drop away, and I find that obviously in the waking state it's more challenging because you've got a physical body. You might have, I don't know, an itch on your nose, or your spine's hurting or whatever. But just try to move past those. Maybe focus on something. I find we haven't talked about hypnagogia yet, but like this hypnagogic imagery doesn't have to be kind of the pre-dream state. There are various levels of hypnagogia, and for me, the meditative hypnagogia that I get is this purple dot that, like, as soon as I close my eyes and relax, then this purple dot, kind of purple sphere, appears in front of my mind's eye. It's very beautiful, very luminous, and if I focus on that, then it's just, that takes me into a deeper level of conscious awareness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh, so much to say here. So a number of things here, Claire, coming immediately to mind. In the Hindu traditions, Advaita Vedanta, Vajrayana Buddhism, and the like, we have our views of reality are completely ass backwards. That we are actually the most asleep, the least potentiated arena for psycho-spiritual development is actually the reified waking state, and that if we're lucid to it, we are actually more able to transform and wake up. We're more in contact with reality in the dream state and in the deep dreamless state. And this is, of course, is why Ramana Maharshi so beautifully and cryptically said, that which does not exist in deep dreamless sleep is not real. So when we land into this fundamental bed, this is exactly as you said. This is the total purview of what's called luminosity yoga, or that's the real meaning of what we call sleep yoga, where we drop into also what the Hindus refer to tie it back in to what you're saying about that this is in fact the bed of all reality. They refer to it as causal consciousness, that everything arises from the space, moment to moment, day to day, life in life. Everything returns to the space. Buddhists refer to it, even though it cannot be named. Of course, it has 100 names. I usually refer to it as the clear light mind for a number of reasons. But so many things here that when we have access, both in the lucid dream state and in particular in lucid sleep, because in the Nyingma tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, Claire, Lucid dreaming is just considered partial lucidity. You're just halfway there.
Mm-hmm.
Full lucidity is lucid sleep. And so when you attain lucid sleep, you're automatically lucid in your dreams. It's just a natural consequence. And so the Nyingmapas target lucid sleep as the foundational practice. That's why, sleep yoga transcends but includes dream yoga. So when you're lucid in the sleep state, you're automatically lucid in the dream. And so this issue of light, oh my gosh, I mean, this is something that we could talk about so much. But let me just say a couple things that this stuff is, talk about the deep dive. This is now when you're starting to get into the very nature of mind and reality. And I often ask people, again, when they're looking at dreams in relation to waking life, when during the course of waking life, how is it that we know and perceive the objects see objects during the day? Well, it's obviously because there's light waves, particles being reflected off of objects and bouncing onto our eyes. But when we're in the dream, where is that light coming from? I mean, how do we perceive the objects in the dream? And so there's a very, very deep exploration that fundamentally will reveal to an explorer, an internal researcher, an internal dream scientist, that the objects are simply made of the light of the mind itself, and so that the objects are self-illuminating, self-aware.
Exactly.
And then you can take that, and in my tradition, we use the nighttime dream as what's referred to as the example dream or the double delusion. And so we study the phenomenology of the nighttime dream as a way to extrapolate the insights again back in the kind of bidirectional process into waking life. And so then we ask ourselves the same questions that we ask during the night. What is in fact the nature of this fundamental reality? And as you know, and I'm so into this right now, Claire, because this is literally one of the main points in the book I'm finishing, the deep dive book, is a really deep dive into the nature of reality as made of light. This is not just, again, rhetoric. This is quantum mechanics, in particular the work of David Bohm and other quantum physicists talk about reality quite literally as frozen light, and that when you return to the bedrock of reality, it's really not at all dissimilar from the bedrock of the mind itself, which is really of the nature of light. And so, in my practice, we have a massive battery of practices that we can now transition into, where we use the darkness of the night, to prepare for death as a way to work with the light, in what the Tibetans refer to, as the dream at the end of time. But just one last comment before we transition into that. The Tibetan view of reality refers to, at this foundational level, that the world is made of what are called bindus, and bindus are not a particularly easy topic to define, but they're sometimes visualized as sesame seed-sized kind of dots of light. And so when you talk about this purple dot that it kind of dissolves, to me, I mean, that is absolutely what we call Bindu principle. And maybe we can talk in the future, because there's no way we can get through all the things I want to talk about.
No.
We can talk further. There's an entire battery of very subtle practices here, Claire, part of the Dzogchen tradition called Togal, crossing over into spontaneous presence, where one literally goes into the dark, does things like dark retreat, as a way to bring out this light, not just within the context of a dream, but within the context of intense sensory deprivation, where these natural lights, the light of the mind, then start to reveal themselves, in fact, as these patterns. And so when I was reading about your work, and you're sharing these kind of hypnagogic experiences, and others where you're seeing this kind of these geometric patterns of light, these actually have a very specific place in the Togal practices that one can cultivate in sleep yoga, and in particular into Bardo yoga. So now you're hitting the very sweet spot of the whole shebang to me. And so let me ask you this, Claire. So when you have this experience, which again, as you know, is beyond profound, it's the very definition of irreducible bliss. I am curious, is this something that you experience? I mean, it's very subtle here. You almost have to switch to totally right hemispheric thinking. Is there a sense that you are experiencing this light, or is it more an experience that you dissolve and actually become the light?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely in the beginning. Yeah, I mean, I guess in the very beginning, it's like, wow, I'm I'm in the light, but then everything dissolves. My ego sense of self, Claire, dissolves. It goes, and I become, well, whatever I am, whatever's left of me, becomes the light. It's pure being. In fact, it's pure being. And in some very rare occasions, I've been able to have a full lucid light experience, also just kind of without being asleep and dreaming. But it doesn't happen very often. One time I had nearly finished, well, I just finished sending off a book to my editor, and you know how exhausting it is, that final gallop towards the finishing line of a book. I was so tired. Oh, like I got up and I worked and worked and worked. Finally sent the book off, and I felt physically ill. I was totally drained and exhausted. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to be ill. I have to go to bed. And this is like in the middle of the day, but I was like, I don't care. I'm going to go to bed. And the moment I lay down on my bed, completely exhausted, I closed my eyes, and immediately the light came. It gathered around me in the room, and I was like, oh, it's, oh my God, here it is. It's the light. And then I was held in the light. I had no idea how long it went on for. And after a while, I came out of it. I felt my body on the bed again. I opened my eyes. I looked at my watch, and it had been like 1.5 hours had gone by. And guess what? I felt amazing. I jumped out of bed. I was like, wow, I'm so full of energy. And I grabbed my bike and I went for a bike ride along the river. I mean, I was like, yeah, hey, I finished my book and I feel amazing and I'm not going to be ill. And I really felt that light just came to buoy me up, and give me energy. It's so refreshing. It's just amazing. And so I really believe that this light is always there. It's always there. It's just that in most states of consciousness, we close the door on it. But if we kind of get more lucid in our life and our way of looking at things, like recognizing beauty. I mean, there's so much luminous beauty right outside, or even within the house, you go into nature, you're closer to that luminosity. You meditate in nature, you're even closer, I mean, there are so many steps, but it's around us all the time. It's because it's within us, we're not actually separate from that light. And that for me is a beautiful, very powerful spiritual realization, because it gives you hope as well. And it takes you through the hard parts of life that we all have. So it's a wonder.
Isn't it? And so many things here. I mean, when you talk about nature and how it can evoke that, it's because nature can help reveal nature of mind. The outer invokes the inner. And I was also struck with how it was exhaustion that led you to this insight, because it's a classical, actual what's called sometimes a pointing out technique, where through a series of physical exhaustions, or sometimes mental cognitive exhaustions, fundamentally the body mind is fundamentally just wiped out and exhausted. And at that instant of utter exhaustion, sometimes you literally can plop into this foundational bed of mind, which really, as you said, I totally jive with what you're saying, where this is where you recharge the ultimate ground of your entire absolute dimensions of being. In Tenzin Wangyal Rinpoche, as you may know, Claire talks very beautifully about how this needs to be distinguished from relative recharging, and how he talks about that when we dissolve into usual non-lucid sleep, we're fundamentally just dissolving into the matrix of samsara. We're dissolving into ignorance, and so that ignorance it hits the refresh button on the samsaric mind. That's where the samsaric mind goes at night. By the way, parenthetically, this is where the samsaric mind goes in distraction, because daily distraction is just a moment-to-moment expression of this kind of more foundational ignorance. And so when we go to sleep at night, we drop into this relative bed to recharge our samsaric batteries. But when you talk about what you're dropping into, now you're dropping into the absolute bed of the awakened mind. That really recharges you, because then when you come up, instead of bringing the darkness of ignorance back with you from regular samsaric non-lucid sleep, now you're bringing the light of full lucidity, the wisdom mind, into your awareness, and that fundamentally transforms your entire life. And everything you're saying is so resonant, because then the world literally and metaphorically becomes lighter.
Exactly.
You bring the light of that awareness with you. It transforms fundamentally on the way up, so to speak, into spontaneous, automatic, clear light dreams. That light continues when you wake up into so-called waking conscious reality. That infuses our experience in the waking state into what we call perfectly pure illusory form. And so, the Buddhist cartography of practices here is, and this is what I just so love, that when someone who's not a Tibetan Buddhist, who doesn't do this stuff, it's a little bit like when I had this beautiful conversation with Robert Wagner, who's another rare being to talk about lucid
I
sleep.
know, Robert, yeah.
Yeah, and I hear you guys talking about the stuff that is just like so up the alley of what these traditions have put forth. To me, it's like, here we go. Nobody has a patent on this stuff, and this is why I'm riffing on it. Nobody has it. This is the nature of mind and reality. It's available to each and every one of us. And even though certain traditions, in my case, the Tibetan Vajrayana Buddhist approach, certain traditions seem to have somewhat sophisticated maps and practices.
Absolutely, yeah.
The real beauty is that someone like you and someone like Robert can drop into these states, and it's exactly the same thing. And you come up, you have exactly these same luminous experiences. And to me, it's just so fantastic. This reveals to me the universality of the awakened state, that
Exactly.
nobody has a patent on it. And so when I read your stuff, it just excites the beans out of me. It's like, oh my God, I mean, look at this amazing thing that she's going through. And so I want to, a little exclamation point on this for our listeners is that when you do have these types of experiences, which may seem, geez, I don't know what they're talking about, that seems so distant, so foreign. Well, you may surprise yourself. These are,
it's closer than you think. Yeah, exactly.
Not only is it closer than you think, there's fundamentally nothing that is not it. And so it's like the inside of our eyelid is so close to us we can't even see it. And so, Claire, any tips and suggestions for cultivating these states? You mentioned obviously working with meditation.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, yes.
No, go ahead. Any other things you can say about this? Is such a rich arena. Any other tips you can share with our listeners about how they can access these extraordinarily blissful dimensions?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the very sort of pragmatic everyday level is look for beauty and look for luminosity in your life, and see where does it happen for you. Does it happen when you're in a particular place? It may be in nature, or does it happen when you're just drifting off to sleep that you get this luminosity? Try and recognize that, and go towards it. In any dream you have about anything, whether you're lucid in the dream or not, move towards the light. If you're in a dream and there's a particularly vibrant animal or dream figure or plant, or if there's a luminous lake, anything like that, reflections, mirrors, move towards the light in your dreams, and that becomes a habit. This is one of the ways that I developed the habit, was just to go towards that. In every state of consciousness, not just in lucid dreams, can be non-lucid dreams, can be in the hypnagogic state, can be, of course, in the waking state, in meditation. Just familiarize yourself with it, because it's part of you and it's there all the time, and it's not as distant as it may seem.
Yeah, and it's very interesting. Again, the very word familiarize is the way meditation is translated in the Tibetan language. The word is transliterated Gom, Gom. It literally means, Claire, it literally means to become familiar with.
Wow.
And so what we're talking about here is exactly that one can become increasingly familiar with these states by sensitizing ourselves towards their manifestation in waking reality. And then so that when, again, it's this beautiful bidirectional thing that we do it in the day, we'll do it at night. We do it at night, then we'll do it in the day. And it, literally illuminating. And so then obviously the next step is the void and its relationship to this light, and the final practice of what my tradition refers to as Bardo yoga. How these practices and experiences can be used to prepare for death. Because again, in the Tibetan view, dream yoga came about principally as a way to prepare for death, and they even refer to death literally as the dream at the end of time. And I find this so compelling, Claire, because very often when people have, I teach a lot on death and dying, Bardo yoga, people often say, where do I go when I die? What will be my next destination? And I will say, you know what? you're simply transitioning from one dream to the next. I mean, we are in a dream right. We're in a dream right now. We just don't know it. We simply reify this experience and make it non-dream-like, principally out of fear. But fundamentally, when this dream dissolves, we just simply dissolve into a different dream. And so, if that is in fact the case, and the Buddha, as you know, the ultimate lucid dreamer, the awakened one, this is what he woke up to. That we're as my teacher Trungpa Rinpoche so beautifully put it once, he said, the bad news is we're falling through space without a parachute. The good news is there is no ground. And so we're basically just cascading like an endless recursive dream with infinite false
that's a very dreamlike image.
with infinite false awakenings. With fundamentally there is no ground, and this of course is the void. And if we then realize that, oh my gosh, we're just transitioning from one dream to the next, that both empowers the dreaming state and then simultaneously kind of disempowers the waking reified state. But let's talk. I'd love to pick your mind about your experience with the void and how you use your nocturnal practice to help you and others to prepare for the dream at the end of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's interesting that you use the word transition or transitioning so often just then, because I always think about how important it is to stay aware during every transition from one state of consciousness to another. So my view is that we can actually get to practice conscious dying, for example, I mean, not just during dream yoga, but also when we stay awake while we fall asleep.
Yep.
Or when we're experiencing hypnagogic imagery and we're surfing it lucidly. And when we're lucid in dreams as well, or when we're in the lucid void, we can also practice that conscious dying. Or when we have an out-of-body experience, or when we have a lucid light experience, or when we meditate in waking life so deeply that we no longer feel the body. So there are all these different transitional states of consciousness. And when we practice staying awake and aware during those transitions, then we're practicing for conscious dying.
That's right.
I mean, the void is fantastic because it's a space of infinite creative potential. So if you're in the void, I mean, maybe you'll just see darkness. Maybe for the first few times you'll just see darkness. But if you're floating in this, what feels like an infinite black space, after a time, you'll notice the luminosity. It's everywhere. You'll notice that coming. You can have black light, We always think black is just black and it's dark, but it's not. It can be just as luminous. And so in that state, it's very easy actually to stay lucidly aware in the void, which is interesting. It's not a thing where you're like, I can't seem to stay lucid. I'm losing my focus. There's nothing to focus on, really. You're just there. You're just aware, and it can be incredible to see the things that arise. You can watch whole dreams being formed. You can see the building blocks of dreams, and it's very good then to just practice, staying lucidly aware and just observing. And I think that is a good practice for death and for what comes after we die. Just recognizing, okay, this is all happening. There's all these things going on, but I'm not going to get too sucked in. I'm just lucidly aware, So I think that this is a way of being able to practice for death. And generally, meditating in any state of consciousness, you can meditate in the lucid void. That's a wonderful practice. You can meditate in a regular lucid dream, or while you're awake, of course. And I think this really helps us just to retain that conscious awareness, let it expand and become vast. Don't make it be like a narrow little cliff path or a tightrope that you're trying to balance on. Let it expand, because it can just expand effortlessly. And then you have your platform, you have your awareness, this vast awareness, and it's no longer hard to retain that awareness. And the more often you experience this very broad, very focused awareness, I believe that's a practice for conscious dying.
That's right. Yeah. Are you sure you're not like some Tibetan Mahasiddha? I mean, like the stuff.
I don't know.
No, I'm telling you, you are, my dear. I mean, the stuff you're saying is just. I'm so inspired by what you're sharing here, and I mean, again, it's just another one of these nod fests. What you're saying here is this is exactly what Bardo yoga is about. Is Bardo, as you know, It's a Tibetan word that means gap, in between, transitional process, and it is
Right.
exactly what you're talking about. It's fundamentally the way to attain awareness, which of course is just a code word for lucidity across any state. And so we've been talking about how lucid dreaming leads to lucid living. Well, it also leads to lucid dying, and the same phenomenology that takes place in the dream state, according to the Tibetan yoga teachings, what's called the karmic Bardo becoming. What they say there, Claire, is that if one can maintain lucidity with some constancy in the dream state, and of course if you can do this in the sleep state, you've already won the game. But if you can maintain some regular constancy in the dream state, you're ensured through the power of habituation. Not all habits are bad. This is a good habit. It's called good karma. Then you will attain that same type of lucidity in the Bardos. And then just like in a transformation from a non-lucid to a lucid dream, the biggest problem after death, the Bardo teachings say, is not realizing that you're dead. It's a little bit like the movie Sixth Sense. And just like in transforming a non-lucid dream to a lucid one, by transforming a non-lucid Bardo experience, the dream at the end of time, into a lucid Bardo experience, now you have control over processes that previously just had control over you. Because if you don't, just like in a lucid dream, or I should say even non-lucid, if you don't take control over your dream, what is it that controls you? Well, your habits. And so again, the master of the one-liner, my teacher, Vijayadhara, said in response to the question, again, what is it that reincarnates? He beautifully said, your bad habits. And so what will take rebirth, as it does every night, again, the measure of the path is your bad habits. And so by becoming lucid in the dream, that proficiency naturally extends into the karmic Bardo becoming. We can wake up in the Bardo, transform that into a lucid dying experience. And according to these teachings, then not only do you just transform the mind, you eventually can actually form and then dictate the entire trajectory of the Bardo experience and dictate where you will be reborn and all that kind of thing. So how has this, let me say this to our readers, listeners, I should say. The void is one of the most challenging terms. In Buddhism, it's referred to as emptiness, which I'm sure is not a whole lot better. That gives you a lot of comfort. I prefer, to me, Claire, I like the more affective component of openness. That what is fundamentally void is not this kind of absolute nihilistic dissolution of everything. Everything constituted of form, i.e., in this case, particularly ego. That's what the void is void of. It's void of your limited, pinched, kind of contracted, constipated sense of self. And when that void is actually experienced, and I think this needs to be emphasized, this is where it dovetails beautifully to what we were talking about earlier. The experience is tremendously blissful, because this primordial cramp of the mind, this primordial contraction of the mind that fundamentally contracts us literally into physical form, is released. And that's orgasmic. It's just like, OMG, this is the great cosmic release. And so I think that needs to be tossed into the mix, so that when people hear and think about the void and they think about emptiness, they go, I don't want to go into the void. Well, your ego may not want to go there, but your spirit does, because that's what your spirit is. And so how has this, and again, this is almost a stupid question, but how has this changed, transformed your relationship to the end of life and to death? I mean, how has it touched you personally?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I mean, it's made me understand on a very deep level that that death is only another transition. Like falling asleep, or like going into a meditative state while we're awake. Any kind of transition in consciousness, and I believe that death is a transition in that sense, and that we continue and we return to the light. So for me, I feel very close to death, and I'm not scared of my own death. I think it's going to be really interesting. Actually.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I love life. I really love being alive. I really enjoy life. I wake up happy every day, and it's just so interesting being alive. But I'm also very fascinated by death, and I think it's going to be really exciting and amazing. And it feels like I've done it before. It feels like it's going to be very familiar. And extremely amazing and full of light. I think it will be a luminous experience, nothing to be scared of. So for me, it's taken away the fear of death, and it makes me feel very hopeful. Yeah.
Isn't it? I mean, really, they say the highest practitioners actually look forward to the moment of death, not in a suicidal way, because they know they know they have something to look forward to. And when you talk about, again, in kind of the Tibetan thanatological literature, when they talk about the actual moment of death, it's literally referred to as the luminous Bardo of Dharmata. I mean, you're actually dissolving into the nature of mind. And so I have to toss in this quote from one of the great masters of the age, Dumbledore, right? From Harry Potter, where he says, to the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. And to me, that's exactly what all these teachings have done. And this is why, I often talk, Claire, about these nocturnal practices as being a form of stealth help, that there's more going on than meets the outbound mind, that there's layer upon layer of these deeper teachings. And so when I have deeply found, and this is why my teachings on Bardo Yoga are completely resonant and confluent with my teachings and understanding of both dream yoga and sleep yoga, is that we're simply working with mind as it's expressing itself and recycling through the extraordinarily subtle domains in several different iterative expressions. One is the sleeping, dreaming, waking state. Even if the other is this dying, living, dying, rebirth trajectory, and then even more subtle is if one's awareness is at such a refined level, we can see this very process occurring with the arising, abiding, and cessation of every single thought. But I think it's a great way to start to close up our conversation, because fundamentally there's so much more going on here than we may be aware of, and the applicability, the endless surprises that await these nocturnal explorers have just such tremendous profundity and applicability. I mean, it's not something that's just left in the darkness of the night. It's something that can profoundly, radically transform the way you relate to your life experience, prepare you profoundly for the end of life, inform and transform the way you quite literally see things during the context of your life. And so as we start, any further comments along those lines before we slowly start to?
Just to say that lucid dreaming and any lucid state can be a source of great spiritual comfort. I think it helps us to understand that we are all spiritual beings, and we have direct knowledge of it when we have lucid dreams and we dissolve into the lucid light, or we have other kind of transcendental sort of experiences. Then we can really understand on a deep level for ourselves that it's all okay. We don't have to worry so much, and everything will be all right. It really will be all right. There's no need to be fearful. It's all going to be good. It's like a spiritual comfort to have these experiences, and I think that helps us to be stronger and face life. In an easier going way, not getting so upset about things and worried, and it gives us some sort of strength, and I think that's important.
Yeah, it really is a journey into the center of ourselves, isn't it? And that's where we fundamentally go when we sleep and dream, and that's where we fundamentally go when we die. And the thing that's really struck me, I had a wonderful interview with an author you may know, James Kingsland. He's about to release a dazzling book in August called Am I Dreaming? Which has a wonderful collection of data on lucid dreaming and the like. And so in this book, what he does that I think is kind of connected here is that he is showing now how these kind of psychotropic agents, psilocybin and LSD and the like, are making a bit of a comeback, and that they're used in a really beautiful way to help people prepare for death, because these agents can dislodge this exclusive identification with form, with ego. And that's what ego is. Ego is exclusive identification with form. And these agents can dislodge that and therefore expand our sense of identity and realize that there is something more foundational than this pinched form of awareness that will in fact die. And so to me, Clara, these nocturnal practices have exactly that type of agency. We don't, or that power, I should say. We don't have to take psilocybin. The ultimate narcotic, the ultimate drug, right, so to speak, is the natural. You could almost say
natural high. Yeah, exactly.
The natural high that we can experience deep within us. And for me, in fact, as you know, when great masters like Ram Dass Swami, when Ram Dass gave his guru 25 hits of orange sunshine, of acid, basically the Lama said, well, like now what? So in other words, it didn't faze him, it didn't touch him at all.
Right.
He was already kind of operative in that domain. And so I think that's when the stability of these mind states and practices have just tremendous applicability. And so to end with a couple, just one or two really practical things, and then I want people to hear about your work, how they can learn more about you and what you're doing. One of the biggest issues, I'm sure you know this very well from your own programs, and I always like to end with when I have such a gifted expert like yourself, one of the biggest challenges with lucid dreaming, of course, is working with discouragement. People hear, they hear these talks and they're super inspired and they're like, oh, I really want to do it. I really want to do it. And then, of course, on one level, expectation is great, but on another level, expectation is premeditated disappointments. And so can you say a little bit, give some words, again, some parental advice about how to work with discouragement, how to keep going when things get a little bit darker against you in these practices?
Yeah, I mean, I think one good thing is not get too attached to getting lucid, because I often get people writing to me saying, I keep trying and I can't get lucid and what's wrong with me and all this. And I think it's nice to just give yourself a break, be compassionate, relax about it a little bit, and then try something different. And one of the things I'm doing in the book that I've just finished writing, which is coming out next year, The Art of Lucid Dreaming, is I have this like lucidity quiz, and that helps people to understand the kind of dreamer and sleeper that they are, so that they can then they can decide like which practices are going to be the ones that are going to get them lucid more quickly, because we all sleep and dream differently. I really see this through people writing to me via my website or asking me questions in my workshops, and people say things like, I just can't get lucid. I fall asleep and I sleep like a log for 8 hours, and then I wake up and that's that, no dreams. And obviously, if you're a deep sleeper, you need to take a nap. You got to do an afternoon nap. It's like, it seems so simple, right? But people, it doesn't occur to them that because they're a certain type of sleeper or a certain type of dreamer, it depends on their dream recall as well, that they can actually simply modify their practice. So it's really good to be able to understand more deeply how you sleep and how you dream, and work out the right moments for you and the right techniques. And another thing that I always say to people is you could try using your body as a lucidity trigger as well. You could, and it's not much fun, but you could go to bed hungry. And every time I go to sleep a bit hungry, I have these dreams about eating loads of sweet foods, like of discovering a banquet outside, and then that gets me lucid, because you say to yourself before you sleep, if I find myself eating in my dream, I'll know that I'm dreaming. You could also do it with abstaining from orgasm. If you haven't had sex for a while, you're more likely to dream about sex. So you could say, okay, the next time I find myself in an erotic situation, I will know that I'm dreaming. Or you could set up a musical trigger in your bedroom. Pick a piece of music that's not too lively and listen to it during the day, and imbue it with your realization that you are dreaming right now, and then set that music to play while you sleep. I mean, all sorts. There's so many little tricks that we can do just to freshen things up. So don't get mechanical about your lucidity practice. That's the worst thing. Boredom is the biggest lucidity killer on the planet. So keep things fresh and exciting, and then your enthusiasm will come back, and things will work. You'll start to get more lucid.
That's fantastic. So would you recommend along those lines? I mean, there are now some apps you can get. Previously, you had to do expensive sleep studies. I work with sleep disorders in my clinical practice, and we often prescribe overnights in labs, but now they're home sleep study apps and the like. Would you recommend, and have you ever worked with these sorts of things and actually constructing your own sleep architecture, like actually having it graphically pointed out to you, like, how much time are you spending in non-REM and REM, and like really determining your sweet spots? Have you done that? Would you recommend that kind of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that's what I talk about in the Art of Lucid Dreaming, is how to recognize, when are you in REM sleep, when you're more likely to wake up. We all have mini awakenings during the night as well. And if you use one of those apps to kind of to trigger when you've had a certain amount of sleep, depending on how long your night of sleep is. Again, it's also individual. If you're someone who sleeps for 9 hours, then you're going to want to set your app to go off at a different time in your sleep cycle than someone who only needs 5 hours of sleep. And there really are people who don't need much sleep out there. So you've got to be able to personalize your lucidity induction techniques for yourself, and then anything can happen. It will really work. It can be very, very quick. You just change one small thing and that's that. I had one guy write to me and saying, I just can't seem to get lucid. I've read 40 books on lucid dreaming. It's not happening for me. And we had a whole sort of in-depth chat about it. And at the very end, as a kind of aside, he said, "Oh, I take melatonin every night." And I was like, "Oh my goodness, you could have told me that at the beginning of our conversation." I said, "Why don't you stop taking the melatonin? Try it for a few weeks or a month." And he tried it, and of course he got lucid again because the melatonin was taking him too deep under. So, some people, even though he was super aware and reading all these books, he wasn't thinking about this really simple practical thing of he's popping this melatonin pill every day.
Yeah.
So it's surprising.
Yeah, exactly. And so again, just since I have such a resource with you here, what are your go-to methods? Like if you were in a lab and you absolutely positively had to have a lucid dream tonight, what would you do? I mean, what are your go-tos?
Well, I mean, I've had a lot of lucid dreams, and I tend to get lucid kind of without really trying a lot of the time. If I had to have one on a particular night, it's kind of a silly technique really maybe for some people, but what I do is I lie down in bed and I close my eyes, and then I shout out in my head, "Dreaming mind, dreaming mind, I want to get lucid tonight." That's all I do. I just shout it really loudly in my head. I just say it to my dreaming mind, and then that's the wonderful for me, that like my lucid dream figures will be like, "This is a dreamy view, isn't it, Claire?" And like give me a look, and I'll be like, "What? Oh yeah. So it is, Or else I'll meet a dream researcher in my dream, or I'll be at one of the IASD dream conferences. It will all start happening. My whole dreaming mind will conspire to get me lucid, and that is the beauty of it. When you have a really transparent relationship with your dreaming mind, then it will help you to get lucid. You're on the same page. It wants that. So for me, that's, it's maybe a different case to some people, but I mean, I just shout in my head.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh, I love it. And so, and what is your view on like the supplements, like, galantamine and all these other ones out there?
Yeah.
What is your view? Do you endorse them? Do you think they're helpful or not helpful, or have you ever tried them?
I think they can be helpful for some people. I've actually never tried them myself because over my whole lifetime I've developed like natural techniques for becoming lucid in my dreams, but I don't have anything against them really. I mean,
Okay.
maybe one day if I wasn't having lucid dreams anymore, maybe I would try something. I haven't felt the need yet myself, but I know that they do work for some people, and so yeah, fine, why not? What's your view?
No, same. Exactly. Why
Yeah.
not? I mean, as long as they're not damaging you. And I've had, that's one of my go-tos. I've had tremendously good luck, and my friend Stephen LeBerge and others. I know Ryan Hurd has also done studies have shown that, that this stuff really does work. And so as long as the agents aren't damaging in any regard, I think to me, and I'm sure this is probably the way you work with the stuff, Claire, is there's so many different methods and techniques now, and very often what I say to people is we're all different. We all have our idiosyncrasies and our sleep patterns. The idea, don't be intimidated by all these techniques. The idea really is to find one way, to find one or two that are your sweet spot, and then that can be your ticket in. The point, unless you're teaching this stuff, the point isn't to master all the techniques. The point is to find your sweet spot, and then let that take you home.
Exactly. Get to know yourself better and what you need and what works for you. It's just a journey of discovery, isn't it? So,
isn't it? All the way across. Wow. And so as we start to round this up, and we have to bring you back on, because even though we've talked about some awesomely cool stuff, there's so much more to discuss. So tell us, Claire, tell us a little bit about how people can reach you. Obviously, we'll put up your links and everything on our site, but like what you're working on, how people can reach you, especially your these incredible programs that you're doing in Europe. And I do have to say to our listeners that Claire's books are extraordinarily well written. They're researched beautifully. They bring a comprehensiveness and a rigor that really speaks to me, and so I recommend your work unconditionally. And so,
thank you.
Yeah, I mean, truly, your expertise, your heart, your kindness, just really radiates through your words. And so, tell our peeps how they can learn more about you, what you're currently working on.
Yeah, so well, basically, you can reach me via my website, which is deepluciddreaming.com. And there's a contact page. You can write to me if you want to share an experience. Oh, and also, I'm writing a book on nightmares right now. Just started it. And if anyone who's listening has any nightmares or any kind of negative sleep experiences, like sleep paralysis experiences, anything else that they would like to share for my book, I would really love to hear from you. I've already got some great accounts coming in, but I believe that these things bring the book to life. It helps readers to hear how other people are experiencing their whole world of sleep and dreams. So yeah, the Nightmare book is my latest project, and I also run Lucid Dreaming Ocean Retreats, and the next one's in October in Portugal. Oh, and that's just heavenly. It's so beautiful there. Have you been to Portugal, Andrew?
I've been through virtually every other country in Europe, but I have not been to Portugal. So I'll have to come to one of your gigs. Yeah, here it's great.
Yeah, come to one of mine and I'll come to one of yours.
Okay,
It's amazing too.
There's a deal.
I'd love to meet you. It'd be really nice to meet you, kind of face to face. And
absolutely.
I don't know, we seem to have quite a common path in many ways. Yeah. So it's always a pleasure. Yeah, so basically that's it. I mean, in terms of contacting me, it's my website, and then Andrew's going to put up a link with my biography or whatever. So yeah, I'm always happy to hear from people.
Yeah, for sure, Claire. Oh my gosh, I feel like I've just connected to a lost long soulmate. I mean, what a rich, warm, beautiful conversation. Really, it's such a delight for me. And really, I've been doing this for, how many decades now? And still to connect with someone with your expertise, your heart, your knowledge, it inspires me. I mean, I leave this thing going, wow. I mean, look at all the other new things I can now start to explore. And so,
well, I'm so inspired by you. I mean, it's amazing. I really feel the depth of your knowledge, and it's lovely. I feel like, yeah, you seem like a really beautiful soul with a kind heart.
You're very sweet. It completely reciprocated. And so, it's really very much in the spirit of what we're doing with our developing venture here called Nightclub, which is to develop this kind of sense of greater community and camaraderie, to realize that, yes, we're weird, but we're not weird alone. Yeah. We're weird together. And as I mentioned, in earlier notes, especially in my conversation with James Kingland, we are leading the edge of human evolution. So, but we all know that, right?
Just a minor thing.
Exactly. But to share in this international community that there are some exquisitely sensitive role models that we can emulate, because one of the biggest issues is there are no role models in the West. And so to make luminaries like yourself more available is certainly inspiring to me, and I'm sure it will be to our club. So Claire, I cannot thank you enough for the generosity of your time. I know how busy you are, and to give this up and to spend time with me and my group means a tremendous amount to me. And truly, I look forward to future interviews with you. And I'm actually kind of sparked by this idea of, I'll come to Portugal, you come to Sedona, and I think we could really have a jolly good time with it all. So, dear friend, thank you so much, Claire.
Well,
really,
thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've really, really enjoyed myself. Thank you, Andrew.
yeah, likewise, and we'll definitely stay in touch for future adventures.
For sure, yeah.
Okay, all right,
Okay,
bye.
take care. Bye.